All right. So, are you thinking about whether you should sell on Amazon in the US or Amazon in Canada? What's the difference? So, sometimes I get the question of what is the difference of selling in the two places? So, my name is Kevin from Maximizing E-commerce. I help people build e-commerce business that they can be proud of globally around the world. So, if you are looking to grow your Amazon sales and you're trying to decide, where's that next stop, hopefully this video will provide a little bit of insight. And so, what we're going to do is compare the US and Canada from the standpoint of growing your sales. So in the US, there's about 330 million people, roughly, according to when I looked up online. And then there's roughly 37 million. So it's a little more than 11% of the US population. It's about the population of the state of California lives in Canada. So oftentimes you'll hear of people getting 10, 20% of their US sales for similar type catalog. So if you have a catalog of 100 products and you only add 2 in Canada, chances are you probably won't get the 10, 20% of your sales unless most of your sales come from, a couple of hero products and that's what you're adding in Canada. But generally speaking, 10 to 20% is a good benchmark. Now, of course, there's no guarantee of what your sales will look like in any particular marketplace until you launch there, because then you get the opportunity to find out. So both countries are on the dollar, but it's not the same dollar. So in the US, we have the US dollar. In Canada, they have the Canadian dollar. They're relatively stable currencies. Both of them stay pretty close to about anywhere between 1.25 to 1.4 Canadian dollars to US dollars. What might sound a little counterintuitive, if you're bringing Canadian dollars into the US, you actually want that number to be smaller. So you want it closer to 1 than, going up to 1.4, 1.5, 1.7. That means you would need more Canadian dollars to get a US dollar. So there is a conversion that you have to keep in mind, and they are different currencies. So when you're pricing products, you got to add on, basically you have to factor in the currency conversion. And so one thing to keep in mind is Canada tends to be a fairly expensive country to live in. Having kind of compared notes to folks who have lived in Canada, and they've told me oftentimes, you're living in a large city like, Vancouver or Toronto, and those tend to be very expensive cities, or someone lives out in the boondocks, because even though Canada is the second largest country by landmass, it's, a fraction of the population of the US. So it's a bigger country land-wise, but smaller population. So people either are in the major urban centers, which are fairly expensive, or they live out in the boondocks, so to speak. And, they can drive, the way people have described it, they can drive out to a general store maybe an hour away, and there's like 1,000 products at the store, or they can pull out their phone, push a couple buttons, and then magically Amazon delivers stuff to their doorstep a couple days later. And so that's why there's a lot of Prime members in Canada. So that is something to just keep in mind, is the currency conversion. But the good news is, even affecting the conversion, oftentimes you can get higher sales there. So in the US, we have sales tax requirements. Now, most states have required Amazon to collect on the seller's behalf and then send to the state. So you're kind of out of the transaction in most states. However, like for myself, I'm registered with the Florida Department of Revenue. I live in the state of Florida, and so I have to have Amazon collect on my behalf. And then once a month, I'm actually in monthly filing with Florida, and I send that money off to the state of Florida, basically whatever collected. So it just kind of goes in and goes out. In Canada, they have what's called GST and HST. So you might be saying, what is all that? So that's the goods and services tax, as well as the harmonized sales tax. This is at the federal level. So it's pretty much black and white. If your sales are at least 30,000 Canadian dollars, let's just call that 23,000 US dollars ish, depending on the currency conversion, you would be required by the Canadian government to get a GST and HST number. Now, I'm not providing tax advice here, but my personal opinion, which again, don't just take tax advice from some guy you saw in a YouTube video, research this yourself. But my personal opinion is, there's no reason you wouldn't, if you were selling on Amazon in Canada, even if you hadn't crossed the 30,000 a Canadian dollar threshold for worldwide sales, not just Canadian sales, but worldwide, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't, because unlike in here in the US, where like I'm in the state of Florida and I take all of the sales tax Amazon gives me and I give it all to the Florida Department of Revenue every year. In Canada, you'd get the GSTHST, which also is added on top of the selling price. So, unlike in Europe, where their sales tax, their VAT, is included in the selling price, in Canada, they add it on top of the selling price. Now, what's similar to VAT in Europe is there are credits. And so there are things, and again, not providing tax advice, but this is just information for your research. There are credits you would probably get as an Amazon seller. And so, for example, when you import goods into Canada, so assuming you're not getting the product from a local supplier, so if you're importing it into the country, you're going to pay GST at the border. And that's typically 5% of the what they call the declared value. So basically what you've paid for the goods at that point. I've heard lots of different people have different opinions who are very smart when it comes to freight forwarding and taxes and all that. But I'll leave that up to you and your whoever you're working with to decide if you're supposed to include freight, insurance, things like that in that price, but it's not your selling price. It's what you've paid for it. So it's definitely including the product cost, but then whether or not you include shipping costs, that's up to you and whoever you're working with to decide. But basically, whatever that number is, you get as a credit. So not the full amount of what you declared value, but the 5% you paid on top of that as a GST, you're going to pay that. And then the harmonized sales tax is basically like all but 4 provinces are on the federal system. So they're collecting. So Amazon's going to collect on your behalf, and then you give it up to the federal government. But the harmonized sales tax essentially is different jurisdictions have different amounts that they charge. Amazon collects it for you and they just give it all to you. And then the Canadian government just says, what were your sales and how much did you collect? And that's what they want to know, minus your credits. And so another credit you would get besides the import for a lot of folks would also be Amazon gives everyone what's called a tax invoice every month. So if you start selling on Amazon in Canada, you're probably going to get this tax invoice that says Amazon.ca tax invoice, and people freak out like, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for paying all these taxes. I don't want to have to pay taxes. No, it's actually taxes you already paid, because in Canada, what happens is your fulfillment fees are actually taxable. So what that means is you're paying sales tax essentially on top of the fulfillment fee. That's not something that happens in the United States that I've seen anywhere. I guess it sometimes could depend on local jurisdictions, but I've not seen that happen in the US. But you are charged GSTHST on top of your selling price. So that's another credit. So if you have those two things as credits, import GST and the GST that you pay on top of fulfillment fees, whatever you're collecting, you're subtracting out. And so basically, you're keeping that difference of what Amazon collected for you, and you're not giving that to the government. So in essence, in a roundabout sense, if you're registered for GST and HST and Amazon's collecting for you, it's almost as if your customer is paying you back for those charges that you were going to have anyway. So point being, in my personal opinion, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to register. Now, I know there is the program called NARF, North American Remote Fulfillment Program, which if you are interested in that, should be a link right up here somewhere where you can watch a video I put together on the NARF program. There are pros and cons of it. Sometimes people think like, oh, it's great because, I don't have to register and Amazon just handles everything. Well, the sales tend to be a lot less. I go into a lot more detail in that video, so you may want to go check that out. But I will just say this: if you can have local inventory stored, it's worth the, not takes all that much time to fill out a form. And, once a year is all I have to file. If you have less than $1.5 million Canadian dollars in sales, you only have to file once a year. If you're doing more than $1.5 million Canadian dollars in sales in Canada, and you have to file more often than once a year, well, you've got a lot of good sales coming in. So, it's worth it to you to pay for someone to do it for you, I guess. Then what's going to happen is I would say Amazon.com. If you haven't started yet, Amazon.com should be stop number one. That should be the first place. Do not collect $200. Don't pass go, the old monopoly term. Go straight into Amazon in the US. And so the only reason why you might want to start in Amazon in Canada is if you live in Canada and you're just trying to understand the mechanics of Canada. What happens oftentimes is because there is more competition in the US and there's less competition in Canada, even relative to the amount of sales. Sometimes people get a little nervous wanting to start in the US, but I say start in the US, figure it out, and then go into Canada. Because, what ends up happening is you will tend to get much better sales in the US, but what you'll do is you'll learn Amazon. And so you'll learn Amazon, how it works mechanically, because once you're set up here, if you have products that sell here, chances are they will sell here too. And you can even validate that using tools like Helium 10 and Jungle Scout, because those tools work there as well. So you can look and see what do your potential sales numbers look like. So that way you can make an informed decision before you start shipping an inventory. And if you are thinking, well, how do I get started selling local inventory in Canada, for example, then right up here somewhere, you should see a link where I will share with you how you can grow your sales into Amazon in Canada, and we'll walk you through step by step how you can do that. So the other note I want to talk about, the less competition and more competition, is because there is higher volume of sales and more competition, there's more people trying to kind of inch ahead of each other, doing some oftentimes tactics that could get themselves into trouble, get their account suspended. And that can be, quite honestly, fairly scary. People generally aren't doing these tactics here. So oftentimes in Canada, what people tend to find is they just turn on PPC and go. Whereas, people are doing sometimes, these giveaways and rebates, which I don't recommend doing anything that would be, gray hat or even potentially black hat that might get your account suspended. Here, it's because there's not as much, let's say the juice isn't necessarily worth the squeeze of the risk. People aren't taking the risk. And so it's kind of just what I think the platform should be. Just, you offer a product, and if somebody wants to buy it, they buy it, and you can run some paid ads. And the nice thing is, nowadays, wasn't always this way, but nowadays, if you're at the time I'm recording this, with your ASIN or UPC, Amazon's going to link a couple things. One, they're going to link your images across all marketplaces, but then they're also going to add in reviews. Personally, I have found Canadians stereotypically nice, and that tends to be the case, even if you're calling the Canadian government. I mean, it's like probably the nicest government agencies I've ever dealt with. I mean, they're very friendly and genuinely helpful. Not a knock on any other government agencies, but I'm just saying Canada, they're super nice and super helpful. And I think the way people review products there is also very nice, very genuine, very helpful. And I think whether they're trying to just share their opinion to help other people looking for a product, or they just have a more optimistic outlook, I don't know. If you're from Canada, feel free to drop a comment in the chat and let me know kind of your thoughts on that. But I tend to find I also get more reviews. So that's also benefiting my US sales. I'm not getting more reviews in Canada than I'm getting in the US, but as a percentage of the sales, because if you think about it, it's only a small fraction of people that actually leave a review. But relative to the amount of sales I get in Canada, I tend to get a higher percentage of people, I should say, is the way to phrase it, that are leaving a review. So hopefully you found this video to be helpful, or at least somewhat insightful on deciding whether or not it's right for you to sell on Amazon in Canada. Or if the US is the way to go. If you would like to sell on Amazon in Canada, you can download my checklist where I walk you through step by step how you can start going from Amazon in the US into Canada. Simply go to CanadaChecklist.com. Again, it's CanadaChecklist.com, and I'll make sure that there's links in the description down below. So thank you so much. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you don't mind hitting that like button, as well as if you are not subscribed to this channel, please consider subscribing. I wish you the best in your e-commerce